Ever wonder how people manage to keep their food edible for months, sometimes even years, without refrigerators, electricity, or modern packaging? Imagine living in a world where every meal depended on your ability to outsmart decay. In the medieval world, survival wasn't just about growing food, it was about preserving it, and the methods they used were as ingenious as they were flavorful. In medieval times, life revolved entirely around the rhythm of the seasons. A good harvest meant the difference between abundance and starvation. When summer's bounty faded and winter's grip took hold, only those who had prepared wisely would endure. Food preservation wasn't a luxury, it was a matter of life and death. Without these skills, famine and disease would sweep through entire communities. From the humblest peasant's cottage to the grandest castle, everyone depended on the knowledge of how to make food last. These techniques didn't just fill stomachs. They shaped culture, trade, and even the course of history. Salt was the cornerstone of medieval preservation, so valuable that it was sometimes called white gold. Salt kept armies marching, fleets sailing, and empires alive. Merchants built entire fortunes trading it, and wars were even fought over it. The process was simple but effective. Salt drew out moisture, robbing bacteria of the water they needed to survive. Meat and fish were either buried in dry salt or soaked in brine. In coastal regions, salt curing was a daily ritual. Fishermen salted their catch before the sun even rose. But this came at a cost. The food became so salty that it had to be soaked in fresh water before cooking. Yet despite its sharp taste, it was a flavor of survival, familiar and comforting in a world where hunger was a constant threat. Smoking came next, a perfect companion to salt. In villages across Europe, smokehouses stood beside every kitchen. Thin strips of pork or fish hung from the rafters above a smoldering fire. The smoke dried the meat slowly while coating it in natural preservatives from the wood. Oak, beech, and applewood each lent their own aromas, creating distinct regional flavors. This practice gave rise to the smoky meats and fish we still love today. Bacon, hams, sausages, and smoked salmon all trace their ancestry back to this ancient art. The smoky scent that once drifted from medieval cottages was not just the smell of dinner, it was the smell of survival. Drying was another essential technique, and perhaps the simplest. Sun and air were free tools, and people used them well. Fruits, vegetables, herbs, and even grains were laid out on racks, rooftops, and stones to dry under the sun. In colder climates, ovens and hearths provided gentle heat for drying. Scandinavians perfected air-drying fish, especially cod, to create the famous stockfish. In southern Europe, figs and plums became dried delicacies that could last through winter. Even grain, the cornerstone of the medieval diet, had to be perfectly dried before storage to avoid mold and infestation. A single damp harvest could mean disaster for an entire village. Fermentation added another layer of genius. Long before anyone understood bacteria, medieval people mastered the science of transformation. They discovered that soaking vegetables in brine not only preserved them, but also created tangy, flavorful dishes that improved digestion. Sauerkraut, pickled turnips, and fermented drinks like mead and ale were staples of the medieval table. Every barrel of pickled vegetables stored in a cellar represented a lifeline through the cold months. And beyond vegetables, fermentation gave birth to some of the most beloved foods in history: cheese, bread, and beer, all products of controlled decay that turned perishables into long-lasting treasures. But perhaps one of the most remarkable and surprising methods involved something sweet: honey. Medieval people revered honey not only as food, but as medicine and preservation magic. Its high sugar content and natural antibacterial properties made it nearly immortal. Archaeologists have even found honey in ancient tombs that was still edible thousands of years later. By sealing fruits, herbs, and even meats in honey, people could keep them fresh for months, sometimes years. The honey would prevent spoilage while infusing the food with a luxurious sweetness. When fresh fruit was nothing but a memory in the heart of winter, a spoonful of honey-preserved plum or quince must have felt like tasting the sun itself. Vinegar played a similar role. turning perishables into tangy delights. Its acidity stopped bacteria in their tracks, making it perfect for pickling vegetables, eggs, and fish. The addition of herbs and spices turned simple ingredients into complex flavors. Pickled onions, gherkins, and even spiced eels became popular dishes. Monasteries often led the way in perfecting these recipes, recording their methods in handwritten manuscripts. The monks' cellars were lined with jars and barrels of preserved goods, ready to feed the community year-round. Beyond these methods, there were other, lesser-known techniques that revealed just how inventive medieval people were. In colder regions, ice and snow were used to store perishable foods in underground pits lined with straw, an early form of refrigeration. In warmer climates, oil and fat played a vital role. Confit, the technique of sealing cooked meat in its own fat, kept it edible for months. This was especially common in France, where duck and goose confit became regional specialties. In some places, ashes were even used to cover cheese or cured meats, creating a protective barrier against insects and mold. These weren't crude guesses. They were the result of generations of experimentation and observation. The rhythm of preservation defined the medieval calendar. Autumn was the busiest season. Animals were slaughtered, fruits harvested, grains threshed. Families worked together for weeks salting, drying, and storing food for the long months ahead. Smokehouses filled the air with the scent of hickory and oak. Women prepared brines and sealed jars of pickled vegetables, while men built racks to hang sausages and fish. Even children had their roles, turning meats, grinding salt, or stacking wood for the fires. These were not just chores, they were acts of preparation, of hope, of ensuring that no one went hungry when the world turned cold. Preserved foods didn't just sustain people, they connected communities. Travelers and traders relied on them to survive long journeys. Soldiers carried salted beef and dried grains into battle. Sailors packed barrels of hardtack, smoked fish, and dried fruit to endure months at sea. Preservation made exploration possible. Without these techniques, there would have been no great voyages, no distant trade routes, no global exchange of spices and goods. Every great empire, from the Vikings to the Venetians, owed part of its success to the humble art of keeping food from spoiling. The flavors of preserved foods also shaped medieval cuisine. A stew made from salted pork and pickled vegetables might sound simple, but it was rich in taste and nutrients. Fermented sauces like garum, made from fish, added umami long before the word existed. In wealthier households, imported spices such as pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were used to complement preserved meats and mask their strong flavors. These combinations gave medieval food its distinctive character: bold, salty, smoky, tangy, and sometimes surprisingly sweet. Today, when we walk through a delicatessen or grocery store, we see the legacy of these ancient methods everywhere. Prosciutto, salami, smoked salmon, cheese, wine, beer, pickles, jams, all of them descendants of medieval preservation. Our modern tools, refrigeration, canning, freezing, and vacuum sealing, may make life easier, but the principles remain the same. Remove moisture, control temperature, and protect against bacteria. The science hasn't changed, only the technology has. And there's a certain poetry in that. The same instincts that drove a medieval villager to hang meat in smoke or seal fruit in honey are alive today when we pickle cucumbers, dry herbs, or cure meats. These ancient techniques remind us that food is more than sustenance. It's memory, culture, and innovation passed down through generations. By studying how our ancestors preserved their food, we see more than survival skills. We see creativity, adaptation, and a profound respect for nature's cycles. Every slice of cured ham or spoonful of jam carries echoes of the past. The ingenuity of medieval preservation wasn't just about staying alive. It was about finding beauty in necessity, flavor in hardship, and sustainability long before the word existed. So the next time you open a jar of pickles, drizzle honey on toast, or enjoy a piece of smoked cheese, remember, you're tasting history. The same methods that kept families alive centuries ago are still enriching our tables today. What do you think is the most fascinating medieval preservation method? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, be sure to check out our other video on forgotten historical cooking techniques you can try today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the past.